based on the premise in the beginning there was marriage, and marriage was good, and that was it. And while marriage, of course, probably still is good, minus at least. But what's underlying both your and my work, interestingly, from very different angles, of course, is challenging this family paradigm of the ideal so-called traditional family, and acknowledging that there are families outside of this paradigm, and that many parts of society, and particularly the law, so my discipline has to take the blame for this, fails to engage with the lived realities of people. And so why do you think that so many people are so fixed on this ideal family based on traditional understanding?
So I think there are a number of reasons, and I think it's age-related as well. So I think for the older generation, and I include myself in this, that most people were brought up in a traditional family with a father and a mother who were there, they were biologically related to. And that's what people know, and that's what people see in the world around them. That's what's promoted. There's stereotypes of the traditional family all over the place. And so it's in a way indoctrinated into us, or certainly to older people. Now, I don't think that's so true these days, because with younger people, many have grown up in different kinds of families. So I think, but the problem is that the people who are making laws, making policy, who are influential, tend to be older. And I think that was something that was very relevant in these first lesbian mother cases, that these were taking place in the mid-1970s, and the judges were generally, in their 60s, 70s. So grew up at, I don't know, in the 1920s, something like that. So when times were very different. So I think there are huge generational differences. I also think that people often just think of non-traditional families as one group, but there's a huge amount of variation within that. And the first non-traditional families that also became more prevalent in the 1970s and onwards were generally families where there'd been some kind of marital breakdown. So children living in single parent families following divorce, or children living in step families. And particularly in these days, when these kinds of families were certainly growing in number, but still, not very well accepted, that children did sometimes have difficulties in these families. So people generalize from that to the kinds of new family forms that you talked about in the beginning, and the kind that are the focus of the book. So children with lesbian mothers, gay fathers, transgender parents, children born through a variety of assisted reproductive technologies, egg donation, sperm donation, surrogacy. And they're very different, mainly because new families are generally families where, have to be actually, these children are all planned. The parents are all, people who've gone to great lengths to have their children. And so it's a very different situation from a child who has experienced, breakdown of marriage.
Yeah, and of course, in many ways, the ideal family is an illusion as well. If you look at the number of family breakdowns that we've had. So, but I think what sort of permeates your work throughout is also that you probably aimed to disprove, and certainly have disproved, many of these very deeply embedded views based on what is the right family, which of course automatically implies that there's a wrong family, and that therefore, this must be bad for children. So in the classics, just, to repeat them for the audience perhaps, is that if you have a child living with two female parents, it was presumed without evidence that there would be a lack of a role model, that they would question their own sexuality or even their gender identity. And there are even more distasteful assumptions here that we shall not repeat because this is being recorded. But so your work, and that of others, of course, has essentially shown that many of these are rather unfounded.
Yes, in fact, all of the research. There's now been a huge body of research on children growing up in lesbian mother families, and these claims were repeated again and again in custody cases later, when lesbian women began to have children through donor insemination, or wanted to adopt children. But actually, there's now been a huge body of research on children growing up in lesbian mother families, and these children are no different than children in any other kind of family. So there's variation in the way there is in any family. Some children have got problems, other children, you know, are very well functioning and do well. But this variation isn't to do with the gender or sexual orientation of their parents.
So what you're saying is that your research showed that the parenting actually is not different.
Yeah, I mean, parenting in a sense is parenting, and you know, in terms of what matters for children's well-being, I mean, there's a large body of research on that as well. So having warm, supportive, sensitive parents who communicate well with their children, who are interested in them, do things with them, give them stability, all of these things, they're the same across any family type. And also the things that make parenting difficult are the same. So financial worries, you know, poverty, something, well, I mean, a whole range of stressors that are the same across family types. So that doesn't make a difference. I think the one thing that does stand out for new family forms is that many parents and children are exposed to stigmatization about their family. And that is problematic. And that is something that is much more specific to different family types.